Hi everyone, welcome to FilmDirt. You know, this day would come. It would come eventually. I'd have to rank all of the Star Wars films. For this video, I'm only going to rank the so-called Skywalker Saga, or Palpatine Saga, I think it should be called. I do like the other spin-off films, Solo and Rogue One. I do rank them both quite highly, so this list alone, I'm just going to concentrate on all of the 9 saga films. Now, I have reviewed all of these individually. Those videos are currently all on my channel now. I don't want to repeat everything I've already said, because I'll just go on a long rant, and no one wants that. If you want to hear my opinion on individual films, I do elaborate quite deeply on the previous video, so I'll link them all in the description below so you can go and check them out. Right, I was wondering whether to start from the worst or start from the best, but let's keep this positive and then we'll go into a rant at the end with the worst. So let's start with the best ones. Now, of course, that's got to be The Empire Strikes Back. It's a fantastically crafted film. It's just going from one captivating moment to another, and it's just continuous. Now, there is a skill to creating a story, but at the same time, you can't just put everything up on screen and see what sticks. You've got to be creative and make each of these beats as interesting as they can be. I just think this film nails it. You only put it on and you only intend to see one scene, but you find yourself halfway through the film and you've already watched, an hour or so. That's what it does. And superb characters, everything is just great. Highly recommended. So the next one is the very first Star Wars. This is the one that started them all. It was originally just called Star Wars, but then as it developed into a franchise, it became A New Hope. A fantastic film, so simple. And just recently I saw some old Alec Guinness interviews online. I think for one of them he was on Parkinson back in the day, and he did say when he got the offer, he wasn't too enthused that it was science fiction. It just wasn't his thing, was it? When he started reading it, he just had to keep on reading it, and that's the skill of a story. And really, when you think about it, with very little money Lucas had and just hopes and dreams, I guess, he did really create a fantastically captivating story. Fair play. I mean, he really found lightning in a bottle with this one. Really, it's tied for top spot, but Empire just about pips it to the line, just by an inch or so. Both fantastic films. And the third one's not too bad either. It's Return of the Jedi, and that's the original trilogy all in the top 3 positions. When I was a kid, I was always really into Return of the Jedi. I think because it was the last of the trilogy and, it had just the biggest moments, especially during the end battle. But as I got older, I got to appreciate the story that The Empire Strikes Back delivers. And you have to think more and it's more emotion. And really, stories like that, they stand the test of time. Special effects age and they start to look dated. Poor acting starts to look dated. But a really good story filled with emotion is timeless. So these 3 films, definitely the top. So what's going to be number 4? It might surprise you. I think Revenge of the Sith is a fantastic film. And just like any of the original trilogy, you just intend to see one scene, but you find yourself an hour and a half in. And you're just captivated, consumed by what you're seeing in front of you. And the second half of this film in particular is just, it just grips you. It's really well put to screen by George Lucas. And many say this film was a return to form for the 3 prequels. And can't disagree with that. So what's next? Surprisingly, I really liked The Force Awakens. It's a curious film, isn't it? I always thought it was the best of the sequels, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But I just think it captured something that the original trilogy kind of had, and we almost got there, didn't we? And yeah, some people say it's very similar in certain areas to A New Hope, when we're talking about story structure here, where you hit certain chapters in a book, and Force Awakens seems to be very similar in the beats that it hits. But in its own right, I think it's a story well told, and we're getting little hints of the original trilogy, aren't we? Han Solo's back, Millennium Falcon's back, and we're getting some of that joy back and the sense of adventure, and we're not too bogged down in maybe politics that bogged down some of the prequels. I just think it's almost as good as the films above it. So what comes in position 6? I did mention earlier some of this list may surprise you. I've always said on this channel when talking about Star Wars films, I think Attack of the Clones is a perfectly decent movie. If it wasn't Star Wars, it would almost be one of those curiously good science fiction films in its own right. But the fact that it's also Star Wars, gives it that burden. And at times, it is a little bit bogged down in confusing politics that really needed to be simplified. And some aspects of the love story are a little bit strange. But when you think about it, it was intentional, wasn't it? Anakin's behaviour was supposed to be a little bit weird by this point, and I think a lot of people missed the political aspect, mirroring Hitler's Third Reich and his methods for acquiring political power. I think we're seeing a little bit of that in Attack of the Clones that we didn't see the first time round. And when I revisited the prequels, I think around the time The Last Jedi came out, I found a new appreciation for not only this film, but all three prequels. I think this one in particular is a lot slower and darker than The Phantom Menace. And I think that's intentional. And it's a little bit of a change because The Phantom Menace was so comedic in places that a dark Star Wars film that really just got on with it. And I think that's why people revisiting the prequels are finding a new appreciation for this film. So I just mentioned what comes next. It's The Phantom Menace. For all its faults, I think it's a perfectly enjoyable film. And, some parts are a little bit too funny and comedic, as I just said. And in the Gungans themselves and Jar Jar, it's just a little bit too much. As well as the rolling orbs during the battle at the end in the field. Just a little bit too odd. What were those balls made of? And, you don't even want to think about it because it's just too much, isn't it? And that whole battle in the field wasn't great. But there's a lot of this film to like. All of those scenes with Liam Neeson and where he's talking to Shmi Skywalker, there's a lot of really good emotional stuff there. And the acting's great. I mean, when you've got a somewhat hokey or unbelievable story, it's up to your great actors to sell the material. And just by watching that act on screen, it makes you believe them. People like Christopher Lee in Attack of the Clones and Alec Guinness in A New Hope, these people actually get it. And they sell a story to you that's, you've got to say it's kind of out there, isn't it? So we come to the bottom of the list. And you know by now what two are going to be sitting down here. So which is the best of the worst? Yep, down there in 8th, The Rise of Skywalker. I said in my review of that film that a lot of it was just incredibly annoying and like a video game where you're finding an object and you're using that object in order to find another object. And then you find another object and it just goes on like that. I think you've got the Wayfinder and you have to find the dagger, then you have to find the decoder, then you have to software reset C-3PO so he can read what's on the dagger, and it's just so much that's unnecessary. And I did mention it in the review, why don't they just use the Force? You can meditate, and you don't have to find all these MacGuffins to reach your final goal, which was to find Palpatine, I assume. I mean, at this point, you've got dead Jedi that can possibly help you. Maybe even Anakin Skywalker, because by this point he's turned to the light side of the Force. Even though he's got nothing to do with Palpatine's movements at this point, surely he can help you. Or am I looking too simply into it? I just think it could have been much simpler told, and it could have had a lot more magic about it. Instead of finding all these objects, it's just a load of nonsense. And talking of nonsense, that leads us, you guessed it, it's The Last Jedi. I'd rather not really get into this film again. I will go into just another rant. Just a lot of unnecessary stuff is just thrown at you. It's not great, and I was really disappointed when I came out of the film. And my son was confused as hell as well. I mean, we just successfully had him watch the previous films, and he enjoyed them all up to that point, and perfectly understandable. You know, it's his first time being introduced to Star Wars for each of those films, so he was looking forward to The Last Jedi, and both of us just looked at each other and scratched our heads, I think. It's a terrible film. I can't believe no one actually proofread the script before it went in front of cameras. You know, if you want to see specific complaints that I have with this film, please help yourself to my review. So I just surmise by saying The Last Jedi is really the worst of the worst. I did try and like it, though. I will admit I did try and see the positives when I did review the film, but I was just struggling with it. How much effort can you put into trying to like something that obviously doesn't like you? So I gave up in the end. So this is my definitive list of all 9 Skywalker Saga films ranked. Let me know if you agree with this list. And like I alluded earlier, just for completeness, I would put Solo above Force Awakens, I think. And Rogue One, where should we put Rogue One? Definitely near the top. I'd put it above Return of the Jedi, so it would be possibly third if we're going to include all of the films. But for this one, this is where I rank all of the 9 saga films. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'll speak to you again in my next review. All the best, take care.